you guys remember saying the Apostles' Creed growing up? Like I know, so I grew up Catholic and Methodist, and we said it every week because if you didn't, you were doing it wrong. But I don't remember. I mean, it felt that way, right? It was, this is how we do the things. So like, do you guys remember saying it? Because I do.
Me, I did. I mean, I grew up Presbyterian as a young kid, and then my parents transitioned to Episcopal. So it was every week. You had to memorize it. I mean, it was all part of it, every Sunday morning. So
I don't remember saying it. I actually texted my dad to ask. My parents are both pastors, and I went to his church more often when I was a kid, and he said that we did it sometimes, but it wasn't every week. He said some people in the church pushed to do it more, but often it was just like when they were, like when he was preaching about something creedal.
So not even like communion Sundays sometimes, but rare.
Say that. I don't know.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did you say it growing up?
Not often. I was also a PK, and my dad, he was more concerned about us living the creed rather than just reciting it out of a routine. And he didn't grow up in the church, so he wasn't raised in a religious home, and I think that's why he had a different connection to the creed. And so I definitely had a different appreciation for it as a kid because it wasn't something that we had to recite all the time. It wasn't until I left home, went to college, and joined another church where they did recite the creed every Sunday, and that was the first time I felt that pressure to know it by heart. And there was a bit of anxiety for me as a kid in college because I remember sitting in the pews and some of the elders in the church would just kind of turn over and look at me.
It was a test.
I knew it. Yes. And I think that's when I began to think a little differently about the creed. Kind of made me angry a little bit in church because it was just a moment where I felt people enjoyed judging folks who didn't.
Are you in or are you out?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Do you know the special handshake? But it was the Apostles' Creed.
Right.
And
right.
like knowing it and having it memorized, it's obviously proof that you follow Jesus.
there's a special handshake.
Dang it, we don't tell them.
All this time.
Did you have to memorize? I remember confirmation.
I had to memorize it.
And then we stood up and I think said it as a group as a test in confirmation.
Yes.
We did that. We did books of the Bible.
Yeah.
Lord's Prayer.
Yeah. So we did that Presbyterian.
Okay.
And did all those things, yeah. And then Episcopal, it was all part of the liturgy every Sunday.
Okay.
And all the kneeling and sitting,
Up, down,
standing.
up, down,
Yeah. A lot of calisthenics. It was great.
No, and there's something to having like a rhythm, right, of like worship. And I think there's something, so it would be called, I guess, high church, where you have like, this is how we do the standing, the sitting, all the things, and it's always the same. Whereas low church isn't like bad, it just means it's more flexible.
Yeah, but I think though that yes, but it also became very rote.
100%. Yeah. So, and I think that's why we're talking about it, right? Is because we do a lot of things in church and we don't talk about them. We say a lot of things, we recite things every week sometimes, and we just don't say why. What is this?
Even the Lord's Prayer becomes that way.
Yeah.
Maybe
we should do that at some point.
Yeah, when I became a pastor, I decided that I would never assume that everyone knew the creed in worship. And so I always had the hymnal out and I would always read it instead of reciting it by memory. And there were some folks who looked at me like, she's a pastor and she doesn't know it. But it didn't bother me because I was more concerned about the people in the sanctuary who probably didn't grow up reciting it. And that's what mattered to me, that they felt like it was okay to pull out the hymnal and read it.
I think that's like a great display of how to do it, because a lot of times in church, if you who was it saying, they were Aaron, you were saying, where they were watching if you did it right or wrong. It's like, is that the point of this? Is that But you were displaying hey, it's cool if you read it. There's so many things we have done in church growing up and we don't always explain it. So I think it's great that we're doing this series. We're going to chat about it. We're going to dig in. We're going to talk about the different pieces. And so every week we're going to look at a different part of this. But this week, we're really diving into the first two words, the I believe, which I think is good because like that's sort of what a creed is, right? Is like a creed is saying we believe this, and there's this understanding of this is how we will do faith together, like foundationally, right? So I'm curious, like for you, are there other creeds? Is there any other things in your life? It doesn't have to be called a creed, but other things like that in our lives that it's like this understanding of how we're going to do things together. What are like other examples of that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, so politics, just the general word politics is like how we do life together.
Mm-hmm.
And so like a creed would be like how we do faith together.
Right. The first time I went to a Nashville soccer game, I was like, whoa, this is a whole thing. Like there were chants that everyone was singing and I couldn't quite understand what they were saying. And so I was trying to figure it out. Couldn't really chant along, but I wanted to. It's a whole culture. And if you don't know what it is, you have to figure it out kind of as you go.
Did they kick you out?
No, they didn't.
Okay, that's good.
They were.
Well, it's either the national anthem, every sporting event too. It's one of those things. But it's varying degrees depending on who you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's that sort of like that understanding, right? Of like, this is how we do things together. But now there's even like, is that really honest to how we do things together?
It is. It depends truly what that means to you and what kind of hurt it has for you.
100%, yeah. Right. Well, and that would be interesting to even think about that with creeds. Like, are there things in the Apostles' Creed or just things we do as church that are causing harm that either we know and don't acknowledge or are trying to work on, or like there's lots of things, or have no idea that it's doing that.
Right. Well, it's like, even when we get to the week talking about, the church, the Catholic Church piece, which we know is bigger than just the Catholic Church. It's not that.
It's universal church.
It's universal.
Spoilers, we're not there yet.
I know. But, there's people who wrestle.
That's the whole
with
week, we just did it.
I've had people who wrestle with that and go, wow, I'm not even going to say that because I have such an angst about Catholic Church.
Yeah.
So.
Apparently, I think it's maybe Lutheran. Some denominations have changed the word to Christian.
Or universal.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's funny too. So like different faith flavors or traditions, even like the Lord's Prayer. So if you go to the Catholic Church, they stop it when you're not ready to stop it. And so we know who's Protestant in the room real quick.
They keep talking.
Because you go in
or the denominations that say debts and debtors.
Yes.
Trespasses. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, it's really funny. So we have these things, right, of how we do them together. And I feel like there's a lot of them that we do that we just haven't talked about. So I'm really excited we're doing this. The I believe piece feels foundational to everything else, right? So what for you, when you say I believe, what does that like mean in this context?
Well, I think personally for me, when, again, coming out of Presbyterian, Episcopal, and even now United Methodist, to me, I'm truly making a statement. It is. I'm literally like standing up and saying, these are the things, this is a mantra, this is something I truly take to heart, the things that I believe in my faith, in my journey. And I stand behind it, 100%. And I'm hoping that the community also stands behind that, saying with me as a community together, that we stand this together.
It is what I believe, but I think there's something about saying it with the community too. It's not just, I don't sit in my closet and say it to myself by myself. I only ever say it in the context of worship in the community of faith, right? And so to me, there's something powerful about that. We're all kind of gathered together, and we may come from very different places and spaces and have different things going on in our lives, but it's something that kind of binds us together, that we're here as a part of this community. And I hope it doesn't become something like you're either in or you're out. Like if you don't know it or you can't say it or whatever, but the powerful nature of doing it in the midst of the worship. Yeah.
That I believe phrase is more about relationship for me. Belief, I think it's head and heart. And that's the part that connects me to the creed, like personally. I believe that God is seeking a relationship with each of us, and that belief is so important to that relationship because God needs us to be anchored in that. So I think that beginning part of that creed just starts off with the most important piece of it being anchored,
Yep.
being anchored in that relationship. This starts here in the heart.
I think too, going back to the community piece, I think it's also not just that local community that we're saying this with. I think this also is a global thing too. I mean, because it's not just our local community that's saying it, it is also worldwide, whether, what language it may be spoken in a different church somewhere else, that we're all saying this together, that we believe in this. To me, that's just powerful.
I think that goes to that universal Catholic part that we're talking about later, is it's bigger than us.
It is.
But that's something I've always wondered though, is like, why is it I believe? If we say it in context of worship pretty much exclusively,
We should say we believe.
why isn't it a we believe? Who wrote this? Who did this?
time for a change.
I am not proposing we do anything about this. I'm staying. It's something I've always been curious about.
Yeah.
Is it more powerful that each individual is saying "I" together than a "we" statement? I don't know.
I think that kind of ties in with another conversation we had about how it's important for us to make God our choice and make Jesus our choice. And so before we can profess the creed as a community and discern what that means for us, we have to take out some time to decide for ourselves what it means to us.
Sure.
And what we think that, is going to require for us practically. So I think it starts with us saying, this is my faith. I'm a child of God, and I want to do life with God.